Coming up next on Noon Edition Extra, Donna Dickman from the Partnership for Violence-Free Families is in with a rundown of some of the support groups that are in our area, so don't go away.
Welcome back, everyone. Holiday season is upon us, and sometimes, unfortunately, it means some grief going around, some issues to deal with. Donna Dickman is a win with Partnership for Violence-Free Families. We don't think about that all the time. A lot of people think, wow, it's a festive time of year, but especially if you just lost someone, something's going on, it can be kind of a depressing time for some, can't it?
Sure, just lost someone, or sometimes those anniversaries and holidays come back and haunt us.
Yeah.
It's like we remember when. So sometimes it's easier to share that with other people in like situations, knowing you're not alone.
Yeah, and you have some great groups, and I didn't know some of the groups in this area that are affiliated with you guys are quite this specific. Let's run down the list. GRASP. Let's start with that.
Okay, and that's for the survivors of suicide's loss. So you have family members and friends. Tough thing to deal with. I can't imagine going through that personally, and I can really reflect on that. But we do have that possibility both in Wapak and in Lima. We hold those meetings. It's the first and second Tuesdays of each month. No registration, no cost for any of our support groups.
You mentioned before we came on that you kind of feel the community out, what's needed, where the gaps are. And unfortunately, you talk about suicide in our area lately, in the last few years, boy, that's been an issue, hasn't it?
You know, that's been a topic of discussion. We've had a summit on that. We wanted to share information about the resource number, how important that is. So yes, last year's numbers were high. This year's we're sort of keeping pace, and we're afraid to see those in numbers too.
Yeah, let's talk about Shelter from the Storm.
Shelter from the Storm. That began in June, and we have two great facilitators. We have great facilitators for each of our support groups. This is happening at the Delphus Public Library downstairs every Monday, 6:30 to 7:30. They have a great group that meets there, and it's for the folks that may be suffering from depression, illnesses, them and their families. Anybody's welcome.
You have a grief support group, and someone made an interesting point to me one time that you can lose someone, lose a loved one, and think everything is fine, and you really don't know that you're going through the grieving process. I mean, do you find that sometimes that once they're finally in these groups, maybe they get a little closure out of this? Right,
that, and maybe things just don't seem right anymore.
Yeah,
and you're not sure what you can even attribute it to. So that's what these are. And who's to say what we lost? You know, grief it can be from a lot of different ways, and nobody's real specific with that. It's how are you feeling, and can we be of help?
You talk about that group dynamic. How does that help sometimes? I mean, I get the sense it helps folks open up and maybe think about things they hadn't even thought about.
Yeah, that, and people realize that they're not alone. That's very important. But also hearing how others cope with it. That's like, you know, I never tried that. Maybe I can too. So it's a learning process from each other. It's just not a lecture series of this is how we're going to get through it. But hearing other stories really is helpful.
One of the groups you have too listed there is about those who have been divorced or separated. A loss in its own right. How does that differ? Say you've lost a loved one, but this, you know, this one person's still around, but they're not in your life. How does that change how you go through that grieving process?
Right, and sometimes there's families involved. So if you have kids involved, that's a whole different story there. Sometimes these things really sneak up on you. Very surprising. How did I even get in this situation? You know, I'm here now. I wasn't here last week, and so yeah, hearing from others helps you get through.
You guys have had groups in the past where the whole family can go through that process as well. Is that an interesting dynamic if you have, you know, say a separation, a divorce, and the kids sometimes can get in and give their thoughts on how that's affecting their lives? Right,
and we don't so much have the youth involved. We've had teens involved in our program. Youth, and we have great partners with Family Resource Center and with staffing to where they help too, and great referrals or help.
What one thing that we have probably more today than we did years ago, raising kids. Seems like it's more of a phenomenon today than it was a lot of years ago. But all of a sudden you have the elderly thrown back into this maternal and paternal role. I mean, you've got some help for them as well.
Sure, and you're right, that is a growing bit. And you can look at it a lot of different ways. There's a lot of drugs and alcohol involvement there to where the parents can't take care of their children and the grandparents step up. But they're raising a generation that has been surrounded by media that wasn't there for their kids. So their kids have seen a lot more of these young kids, and they've grown up in a different world than their own children were raised in. So how do we address that when your kids can teach you how to manipulate that iPad? You have no clue what they're talking about. So it is a different generation, and we all need help at times.
Okay, great groups. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Jeff.
No, go away. Brian is back. Have a look at your weather forecast.